Sam, welcome. It's great to see you.
Winthrop, it's great to see you too.
Yeah, this is going to be a really wonderful, fascinating conversation, I know. So let's just start off with a bit of history, both personal and organizational, about what essentially in your life story brought you to conceive of Millenium Campus Network.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, and my North Star in all of this is helping young people own their voices and power to make a difference. And that stems from my own journey. I was shy in high school. I really didn't fit in. There were many times I would be in the school cafeteria and I would look to my left, look to my right, not see anyone that I could sit with, and walk home and eat lunches alone. And so I think even from that age, really what I was longing for was community. And when I got into Brandeis University, that was really what I sought out. First and foremost was connections, friendships. And then I read two books that really changed my life. One was Mountains Beyond Mountains, about Dr. Paul Farmer and the organization Partners in Health. And the second was The End of Poverty by the economist Jeffrey Sachs. And in reading those two books, I learned about the complexities in our world, the fact that over 700 million people live on less than $1.90 a day in extreme poverty, but that also there are things big and small we can do to respond to that crisis. And so when I was 19, put down those books, picked up the phone, cold called Jeff Sachs, went down to Columbia University 2 days later, met with his team. I said, look, I'm a sophomore in university. I don't have many answers yet, but I know that our generation can do more to tackle extreme poverty, to advance the Millennium Development Goals at the UN, now the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And I want to figure out what role we can play as students. And so came back to campus, started small-scale public health fundraisers. In the fall of 2007, convened students from across the city of Boston, and we said, look, we're all focused on injustice, but we're doing this work in silos. Those silos minimize impact, minimize diffusion of knowledge. What would happen if we collaborated? And 6 months later, we had our first summit at MIT with 1,000 student leaders from around the world, with Paul Farmer, Jeff Sachs, John Legend, Henrietta Fore, so many other global leaders. Paul, Jeff, and John joined our board of advisors. They said, we're in, let's help you build this student network on poverty. I said, I'm 20 years old. I'm not sure what this is yet, but let's give this a shot. Let's really try and build this. And so we launched Millenium Campus Network, MCN, as a platform for undergraduates making a difference, that has since kind of slowly and incrementally grown over 13 years to work with undergrads in 20 countries who are advancing the SDGs.
How did the network part of that really evolve so that you kept people, the students, collaborating and connecting with each other when in many other aspects of their academic lives, they're doing everything pretty much individually for grades and to graduate and get credits and so forth. So there's a mindset question there, and there's kind of maybe a methodology question in that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great question, Winthrop, because I think this really gets to the heart of what pedagogy is and what effective pedagogy looks like. For us, I think there's a recognition that there are so many young people, particularly in Generation Z, who want to make a difference. But there's also this truth that work can be very lonely. And I think when you try and do that work alone, it can be overwhelming, and that can lead students away from these spaces. And so both in terms of mindset and methodology, at the heart of this, uh, our belief is that there's power in community. There's power in that it really can affirm a student's own perception of self and their ability to create change, because they know they're not the only one doing it, and they have a cohort of peers on their campus to learn from and with. as well as peers around the world. And then in terms of methodology, the way that we've built out our programs is to really think about, how do we put those support systems in place for students. And so we've focused on training, connections, and credentials as three key gaps in the market that we try and help fill in at the undergraduate level. But it's all really in service of students. It's creating the conditions for students to collaborate meaningfully at a campus level and between campuses. And I think that's vital. I mean, because whether you look at research from McKinsey, when they talk about the needs in the social sector, one of the top needs is for skilled collaborators. We need people who are able to work across organizations, who are systems thinkers. And so we've really sought to address that at the campus level.
It's an experiential learning experience more than a didactic one, right? And so you're not necessarily throwing a lot of systems thinking theory at them and expecting them to unpack it, but really to form teams. Or maybe you could talk a bit about kind of how they collaborate.
Yeah, so here's how the program works in practice. Um, the Millennium Fellowship is a semester-long leadership development program for undergraduates who are advancing the SDGs. So it's 10 sessions over the course of the fall semester. 6 of those sessions happen on campus, and then 4 are virtual. And so students apply around the world. This year we had 25,000 applicants from 1,500 campuses in 159 countries. We look for strong cohorts, so not individuals, but cohorts of students, typically 8 to 20 students on a campus. Those students, we train 2 of them as campus directors in the core curriculum, and they then run the sessions on campus. And the sessions focus on core values cultivation, so the role of empathy, humility, inclusion in driving social impact, honing hard and soft skills. So whether that's learning how to manage volunteers or create a budget, a lot of the fundamentals that students need to lead in social impact. And then we layer on top of that a webinar series where we bring in leaders from the UN, the Gates Foundation, and others to really showcase to students the myriad of pathways into social impact careers. Students then take what they're learning from the Millennium Fellowship and apply it in real time to projects, whether that's in Michigan creating a community farm to tackle food insecurity on campus and locally, or whether that's at the University of Benin in Nigeria, students leveraging solar power to provide electricity to 106 community members each night. A lot of these are small scale projects, but they're local, and that's where so much change happens and starts. And in aggregate, Millennium Fellows last year, we had 1,211 on 80 campuses, volunteered over 200,000 hours on 711 unique projects, positively impacted the lives of more than 800,000 people in 20 countries. And so for students to see those numbers, I share them because, again, in terms of the power of collaboration, for students to see in aggregate what a movement can do, all of a sudden you're not alone. You're a part of something much larger, and your small project is contributing to a larger movement. And so that's really how it works. We're providing training, connections, credentials. The credentials piece at the end, students earn a certificate from United Nations Academic Impact and MCN upon completion of the program. And so by filling in those 3 gaps, we're really helping to harness student power for the SDGs.
Yeah, and what going back to the fellows themselves, part of they're both learning and at the same time, I suspect, having to unlearn to be able to collaborate. So given what they're usually students in a very narrow discipline, and they're kind of have to put the blinders on and work on that, and that's how they've been sort of socialized often. What is it that you're finding are sort of the friction points, or the points where you really have to help them to be able to effectively, truly collaborate and develop that systems thinking mindset? What are some of the challenges and areas where they have to unlearn what they've been taught to be able to do that effectively?
So there's 2 points that jump out to me on this question. Um, one is something that my colleague Abigail Ketchen really taught me, which is, she said, Sam, so many times when people go into a community, they go in with a savior mentality, what she termed heropreneurship, going in thinking they have all the answers. And so part of what we really try to do as students, what she's instilled through our curriculum, is to challenge students' own core assumptions about why they're doing what they're doing and how they're doing the work. And so that's really about the collaboration that they have with the communities they engage in. And we do simulations and scenarios. For instance, one is person A is helping person B, but you know nothing else about either person. Give character traits of the giver and receiver. And what you quickly find in this experience is that the giver has all these positive attributes, the receiver a lot of negative attributes. Then juxtapose, then kind of take that paradigm, put that onto how international development has been done for 5-6 decades, and then think about how that might manifest in your own projects and initiatives. So that's one way that we really try and have students unlearn what they might think about the role of students in social impact. And then the second piece is built into our program is peer-to-peer feedback sessions. So every time a cohort meets on a campus, there's time built in for fellows from different projects and initiatives to share out what they're working on, a pain point that they're working through, and have peers from other organizations share their expertise, their learning. And so just by going through that practice and building that in as a part of the experience, students suddenly see, aha, there's other people with other knowledge that may inform our own work, and in other cases, we might be able to support them. And so I think that makes collaboration just more real and possible.
Yeah, wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe we could start with the power dynamics question, because I bet you see it at so many levels, both in terms of that savior mentality, hero mentality, also perhaps with race and gender, and to the extent that students are working in places like from the United States to the global South. So maybe talk about, let's just maybe focus on the US and what you see here, especially in light of the last couple of years and Black Lives Matter. I'm sure your students are diverse themselves, and so we can talk both about students to community and then students with each other, and kind of how that is a learning opportunity to create some of those more humble, less biased mindsets. So what do you think about all that? How's that showing up for you?
One of the things that I've come to really reflect on a lot in the last year, um, in terms of the complexities of our world, and in this country in particular, one is how little I know. One is how much I personally have to unlearn. And part of that is like how I show up in meetings as somebody who is white and male and identifies in that way, and brings that privilege and power into conversations. And so I think that's a piece of it, is first and foremost a kind of acknowledging identity, and how identities play into this work, and how they historically have in international development over many decades. Uh, and then two is, one of the things that I found in research from grad school is looking actually at a set of regressions that found that when we look at civic engagement programs in higher education, In particular, Black students were not deriving the same benefits as their peers in these programs, which was a really alarming, unsettling statistic, and something that I think for us means, I mean, in part, we don't have the answers. We have a lot more to learn, and grow and change within our programs. But two, more broadly for this space, um, it means that, in part, we've been more focused on building a diverse network and thinking really intentionally about making sure we're building networks that are really inclusive at every stage, both from admissions and recruitment to how the program actually runs.
Ironically, often when we look at sort of programs that are emphasizing teams and collaboration, it's according to a set of assumptions, and it's been created by those privileged people, right? And so, how do you co-create
Mm,
so that those structures and processes really truly reflect and are owned by the full diversity of people involved?
that's a great question. that's that's a great question. I think for us, that co-creation means, at the heart of it, it's about trust. Uh, it means really trusting the community members that you're engaging with. In our case, Millennium Fellows are undergraduates. And so co-creation with these young leaders means not being prescriptive. We don't tell Millennium Fellows what to do. We don't say you have to solve for this particular challenge, or you have to do it in a certain way. No, what we're really doing more than anything is trying to center their own lived experiences, listening to them, learning from them, creating spaces like we do virtual SDG conversation hours, where we're creating the space for them to really share their own experience across campuses, across communities around the world. So as they think about public health or education or community engagement, what really works and why, and what doesn't work and why not. But for us, co-creation, it's so important. And I keep kind of sending this message to and sharing it with our team is, we don't have the answers. Don't pretend that we do. Um, and don't perpetuate the same systems that got us where we are today. Really have the courage to say we don't know. We're going to learn together. We're on the learning journey together, um, and to trust the people who are doing the work, that they may have some or many of the answers that we're all collectively seeking.
We are in a journey all together. And I also hear in what you said that the way that you're teaching, or that the fellows themselves are learning empathy, is through that direct connection to others in those environments, and that it's obviously a two-way street. Well, Sam, we've talked a lot about collaboration among the fellows themselves, and that's key. Let's maybe take it to the level of the organization and how you've been able to implement collaborations with other institutions, either one-on-one or in a networked fashion.
Winthrop, it's such an important question, and for us, there have been some collaborations that really stand out. One that I would spotlight is with the United Nations. So in 2017, I remember meeting for lunch with Ramu Damodaran, then the chief of the United Nations Academic Impact. It's a network of over 1,500 members, primarily universities around the world, that are supporting UN goals. And they've always been exceptionally good at engaging university presidents, deans, faculty, researchers in support of UN goals. And our expertise at that point, nearly a decade in, was on student engagement, engaging with undergraduates to advance the SDGs. And so we sat together over lunch and started to imagine what collaboration could look like. And really what emerged was taking the Millennium Fellowship global together. and having leaders from the UN come in and speak and engage with Millennium Fellows, having them share the opportunity across their network, doing a joint certificate for every Millennium Fellow who successfully completed the program. And so really what that meant was it added significant credibility both to the program, but also to the student leaders that we engage. For all these Millennium Fellows around the world to feel understood and heard and validated by an institution, UN entity, meant so much to all these young leaders we engage. And so that to me is such an important piece of advice for all of us in this space, is to recognize that we have so many resources to bring. It's not just the funding that philanthropy can bring or that an institution can bring, but you can bring your brand, you can share your brand, and when you can find ways to do that that are legally compliant, that make general counsel and everyone check the box and say this works, it can open up so many profound collaborations, but it can also democratize change and movement building and credibility, because all of a sudden leaders around the world can share the credibility that they need to really gain the resources they need at a local level. And that's something we've been really excited to be a part of.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you're so right about the branding issue as one that really constrains a lot of these collaborations. And too many institutions are too zealous about guarding their brand and unwilling to share what is a very powerful potential tool for really being able to expand opportunities like this and have greater collective impact. So it's not just about sharing financial or other tangible resources, but maybe some of these intangibles like the brand.
And on that note, Winthrop, I'd say, for any philanthropist who talks about scale, they all, like everyone I always hear today, it's all about measurement, valid, understood, but also scale. We want to reach as many people as we can. If that's something that you're serious about, then you have to be putting to work all the resources that you
Sure.
have, including the brand, because it doesn't cost you any money, but it really can give people, really help them own their power, and be recognized to go on to get the resources they need. And to me, that's when you think about how you achieve scale, that's one of the fastest ways to do it without even investing any money.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that point because one of the impediments to true collaboration is this idea of scale as a linear process that is attributable to one person or one institution, as opposed to something that can be replicated and shared and expanded across many people and institutions. And I think our traditional model says that we need to be the hero. We built this widget, we scaled it to 10 million, as opposed to we created a movement and a new approach to solving a problem across many institutions who took what we did together and replicated it, right?
100%. And again, like this leader that I was, probably the person who changed me most during grad school, was reading about Ella Baker, and what she did with SNCC, and her famous quote, "Strong people don't need strong leaders." It's not about a single organization or leader. It really is about these leaderful movements at the grassroots level. How do we play small roles in really affirming and strengthening these movements at grassroots community levels? I think it takes all of these pieces, and it takes a lot of creativity. And we can't ask nonprofits to scale and use all the resources that they have, but then be guarded and hold the resources that we have. That's not how change happens. I think we need to be a lot more collaborative, not just in terms of how we engage others, but as a mindset, with the resources that we have. And that's a much harder proposition, but I think that's how you actually start to create systemic change.
Sure. And The clock is ticking. We have to do it.
100%.
Great. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.